right now. As you can see, I've got this little section of stuff. All this stuff right here was in my greenhouse that you can see right here. This little pop-up greenhouse. This is one of those um, cheapy ones you buy on Amazon. It has worked out well for me. I've got in here, this right here is either Swiss chard or perpetual spinach. I'm not sure because I didn't label it. Right here in this milk crate and expo bag I've got set up here. I've got some radishes that I'm letting go to seed so I can collect the seeds. And I've got some potato plants that I planted in here last summer, and it was too hot for them, so they didn't grow. So I thought they were duds. And I had initially planted a bunch of radishes in here, and then the plants came up unexpectedly. So it was a little surprise. So that was cool. This is some dill from last year. It survived because we had a pretty mild winter. Over here, I've got junk, an extra garbage, actually a couple extra garbage cans, a shed that I'm gonna sell after I clean it up. Got some windows that I'm saving for cold frames. And I've also got some paving stones and some bricks that I am currently not using. This area along the side of my yard, there's planting strips in between the concrete and the fence, but there was nothing but weeds there last year. I cleaned it out, and I'm just trying to keep it covered for right now until I come up with a better plan. Over here, this, as you can see, this was labeled. So I planted carrots, radishes, turnips in here on February 12th, but they did not do very well. As you can see, they're just barely starting to take off, and some of them are struggling. But I plan on just eating the greens because it's almost too late for them now anyway. This is a laundry basket lined with landscape fabric. I did label this a little bit. So there's turnips, radishes in here. I planted this on the 20th, and then more turnips and radishes in the one next to it. And so I planted these really close together so I could harvest some of them for greens. You can eat the greens that grow on the top of radishes and turnips, just in case you guys didn't know that. And then I was going to thin them and let some of them grow out into radishes and turnips, but the greens are doing fantastic. I'm going to eat them because it is April now, and it's going to be too hot for those types of vegetables very soon. So same thing with this. I'm going to just eat them, the greens. And in here, I've got a volunteer tomato plant, this one right here. It is too cold, generally speaking, for tomatoes, but that came up as a little surprise from the tomato plant that I had up on my deck. A lot of the little fruits fell down, and so I ended up with a couple of volunteer tomatoes, so I will be keeping those. This container is a larger laundry basket that is lined with landscape fabric, and these are my strawberries. So I planted them in here with the intention of having them grow down the sides. Some of them have been more successful than others. I did have some planted in the sides, and most of those did not survive, but most of these are still kicking, so yay. This container right here is actually a garbage can that I got at IKEA. I think I labeled it. Oh yeah, on this side. So I had planted mosh, carrots, and radishes in here. Or maybe this is a nope, this is a radish. You can see all the way down here. Little tiny baby radish. See that little bit of red? The tiny radish. If you have always thought you don't like radishes, but you've never tried them fresh, try them fresh. They're delicious. So that was also planted earlier this year. These are, I think, spring onions. They might be walking onions. So I planted these last year. These survived all winter because they are really hardy. In this container, I had at one point planted lettuce, and then I had gone back in because it was too hot and lettuce didn't grow. So I planted oregano. Now I've got both growing in here. So this right here is lettuce. And then these little plants down here are oregano. So what I'm going to end up doing is pulling everything out and saving some of the oregano and planting that in a different container and then planting the lettuce somewhere else. This container right here was lemongrass that I planted last year. I'm not sure if it's still alive. It looks dead, but when I tried to yank it out, the roots were holding on really strong. So generally, I apply a root or a pull test. So something I think is dead that is established. If I try to pull it and it doesn't come out, I leave it a little bit longer to see if it still might be alive. And then in this little container next to it, I've got more strawberries. And hold on, I'm a little bit stuck. Over here, got an earth box. I'll be planting my cucumbers in there. Up this post, you can see my fabric trellis and zip tie structure. I grew my cucumbers from these containers up into the bottom of my deck on these fabric trellises, and it worked out fantastic. Because of a very small yard, wherever possible, I grow up. So I tend to choose vining varieties of tomatoes and cucumbers and beans because I can go straight up with them and it takes up less space in the garden bed or in the container. I also have a bunch of hooks and a solar light that I use to keep for a little extra light in here, because if you have followed any of my She-Ra the Night Huntress or She-Ra the Huntress shenanigans, a cat comes out here and hunts, and I want to see what she's got before I get there. So I put up some solar lights so I can see better. Most of these little plastic containers either came from Walmart or the dollar store. These hooks that I have these plants came from the dollar store. You just have to go check it out. These other little containers up here, either that I saved something that I bought another plant in and I reused them. Always want to recycle upcycle as much as possible. And then these are solar lights, but not all solar lights are created equally. This big monstrosity here with the plastic garbage bag over it is my compost bin. So I will show you this real quick and then we'll get into this in depth later. But as you can see, it's a standard garbage can that I drilled holes in. There are holes on all four sides, on the bottom and in the top. I need to make some modifications to it, and I will take you along on that journey on another time. I've got piles of stuff. Some of these, like these paving stones and all this wood, that actually was in the house when I moved in here. But whenever possible, I reuse it. There's another earth box that has nothing in it. This one actually had tomatoes growing in it, and they come with a staking system with the middle metal rods. So I had it growing up, and then I had the tomatoes straight up. I had everything arranged so I could get from the back door out the gate and leave floor space for the dog and cat to like wander around and have their adventures. Because if I don't give them any space, then they get really aggressive about climbing into my containers, which is no good. This right here is lettuce from seeds that I planted that didn't grow last year, but that came up this year. This right here is a volunteer tomato because I had tomatoes everywhere. They're still out here all over the place, thanks to the birds. I'm not sure what these other things are, but I'll probably just dig them out because the cucumbers can go out in 2 weeks. These four bags. These are grow bags. Grow bags come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. So these are 2 foot by 2 foot square grow bags that I bought so I can make a 4 foot by 4 foot raised bed. Unfortunately, what I learned is when they're filled, they're extremely heavy, and 2, because the way my fence is set up and with the position of the sun as it moves in the sky, My little grow bed right here only gets direct sun in the dead middle of summer, which is why my greenhouse is under the deck and not in this area of exposed space. So this area back here is 15 feet by 22 feet. And so I had to make sure that my greenhouse was going to fit in here and fit under the deck, because in the wintertime, as the sun goes down lower in the sky, so the sun is like straight up here. My backyard faces south. So in the summer, the sun is like straight up. And then as the seasons change, the sun starts to come in at an angle. So with this angle, the sun goes underneath the deck where my greenhouse is. It is not sunny today, so you can't see, but when the sun is out, the things in my greenhouse that are growing right now are positioned so they get the most sun on the top shelf, but underneath the deck. So that is something I learned after I had started growing this, like setting up this like fantastical my setup in here. And then I realized that stuff along here and stuff that I had growing up against the fence wasn't getting any sun after we left the peak of summer. So I am going to try to get over here without breaking my neck and show you guys the rest of this stuff. This right here, this is a pop-up dog run. So in my last apartment, I had one of these set up to keep my dog in a contained area so he wasn't able to get to the front door and bark at everyone who came in the building. And then I had a 4-foot setup. So I had 2 of these connected together, and it gave him a 6 by 8 run, something like that. It was 6 by 4. 6 by 4 run made up of 2 of these, and some of it was overlapped. So that was his little playpen for the day when I was at work. And then he started to jump over the 4-foot high length. So I went online and bought the 4.5-foot tall. And then I started taking him to daycare, and I never set it up. So when I moved over here and I had this thing, and now I have a yard, I decided to just save it and repurpose it when I found a purpose for it. Repurpose when I found a purpose. Awesome. Okay, so I did have this set up against the fence. I was growing green beans along this and some other stuff, but when the sun shifted positions, it wasn't getting any sun. But I did have stuff growing all the way up to the top of here and then above. This is some Texas hummingbird mint. This survived over the winter. This is lemon mint. It didn't, but you see, I don't know if you can see that. There's babies in there. So some of this might be my mint coming back. We'll see. This right here is purple nettles. This is an edible medicinal weed. I dug some of this up from behind my house. I'm hoping that some of it catches and grows. Generally, I am not the type who would just eat something that I foraged wild. I want to get some seeds from this and then start a new one from seed, because they use chemicals all over the place. So anything that I find growing out in the wild, I'm not going to just eat from around here, but I will do a grow out and eat the second generation. This container had beans in it. There's not any in there right now. This container has sunchokes in it. So last year, I got some sunchokes from a friend, and I planted them in this container, and I thought that they were not going to come up until like May. And then I planted some leafy greens and lettuces on top of that. And the sunchokes came up out of nowhere and choked out, all the stuff that I had planted on top. So I did not plan to plant anything else in here. I did dig up some of the sunchokes. They were very small. And I was thinking maybe I would separate some of them out and grow a second container so they would have more space. But these things took off so fast, I didn't get around to it. So lots and lots of sunchokes. This is another thing where if you plant these in the ground, these are very, very, very invasive, but they're also delicious, and you can leave them outside all winter and store them basically in the dirt. And they're very good for you. There's another earth box. I actually have 3 of them across my yard. You can see my dog. So I had 10 plants growing up. These fabric trellises last year. The plants ended up doing very well, but I got them planted late. You're going to hear me say this a lot because I'm a hot mess gardener. But so I ended up getting a lot of good growth on the plants, but only about 2 to 3 cucumbers per plant. So I'm starting them early this year so I can try and get a second wave, because in July it gets really, really hot here. And the plants were struggling and the blossoms were either not setting or falling off because it was too hot. Oh, another note about these fabric containers. One, I did not fill them all the way up because they're expensive, and it was really expensive to fill them up with all that dirt, and they're really heavy. So this year, what I'm doing is making some what's it called? I'm putting them up on wheels, basically. I can't think of the word right now. My brain is fried. I'm not sure if you can, it's a little bit too far away, but basically my my earth boxes have wheels on them. Several of my heavier containers are set on little rolling platforms. And what I realized in my small area is that because the sun moves, I need to be able to move my containers so they can follow the sun. And anything that's heavier than about 20 pounds when it's full needs to be set on a little dolly with casters. So some of them you can buy, but depending on where you get them, they can be really expensive. So I got a couple of pallets, and I will be making some for this. In the short term, I did find some furniture dollies that might work, but I'm not sure if they'll sit on there because furniture dollies are rectangular and they're really narrow down the middle, and these are square. But as you can see, I have a volunteer tomato in here and a bunch of volunteer stuff growing in these. I had peppers growing in here last year and tomatoes growing in that one over there and that one over there. So a lot of these volunteer babies are tomatoes from the seeds from the plants from last year. Oh, and it's starting to rain. So just show you a couple other things. These fabric planters right here, these are 7-gallon ones. I got the square ones so they would be more stable if I had to move them around a lot. They are sitting on foil pans. You are going to see me using a lot of foil because foil is easy to come by and it's cheap. But I use these underneath the planters because the water wicks out of them very easily. So when you're watering a fabric container or fabric pot and it's sitting on concrete, the water is just going to absorb into the concrete, and then the container is always going to be dry. The dirt will be dry and your plants will suffer, and you'll have to water them all the time. So in order to create a small barrier, I have these 7-gallon pots sitting on foil racks, these huge ones sitting on a blue plastic tarp, and then I use small plastic trays for the 2-gallon ones I have. I have a lot of 2-gallon ones. Back here, as you can see, I'm doing my best to maximize my space while also maintaining space around your air conditioner. Don't put your plants on your air conditioner. You'll regret it. More containers. This is just storage. These are the metal trellises that come with, that you can get with the earth boxes. It's extra, but it's worth it. I've been using them since I had started my first garden in my first apartment in 2002-ish. So I don't remember if it was that first summer or the second summer that I was stationed in Alameda, but tomatoes and earth boxes and some poppies in a pot. And because I've always loved tomatoes, those were my first things. I've been using earth boxes since then. I love the wheels and the staking system, so it's just really convenient. It's easy, and you can get a discount when you buy them in bulk. And then here's just more stuff: my pooper scooper, my garbage can, my hose setup, And then this is another planting strip that had this huge, gigantic yucca planted up close to the house. And it took me 2 years of poisoning it to finally kill it enough where I could dig out the roots. The soil here is poor. It's very heavy clay. So I don't have any current plans to plant anything in the planting strips along the house or along the fence, but I can at some point. I did do my best to loosen up that soil with some gypsum and cover that with cardboard and some landscape fabric that the cat keeps digging up. But we can talk about that more later. And this video has gone on longer than I had thought it would. I've been rambling. I will show you a peek inside the greenhouse. We're not going to go in there today. It's warm, but not warm enough to let the outside air in. So you can see there's a little bit of condensation built up in there. I'd like to keep it warm and humid as possible without adding any additional heat. But I do have black plastic garbage bags on the ground between the concrete and this thing to absorb some heat during the day. And I make sure that I always have containers sitting on the bottom shelf inside to weigh it down so it doesn't catch wind. So in this area in my yard, this greenhouse is protected by the fence, but I live in a very high wind area, so I don't want to take too many chances. All right, that's it for this tour. I will post this either today or tomorrow, and then I will do a tour of my deck another day because now it's raining. Thank you for checking out my garden. My name is Quincy Adams, and I want to help you grow some of your own food in a small space on a budget. Have a great day. Bye.